Every individual goes through different phases in their lives. Our life starts as an infant, then we move into the childhood phase, then the adolescent phase, then adult and old age. In our recent discussion, we have come across a term called as metamorphosis. This is nothing but metamorphosis of human life, starting from infancy, reaching till old age, then end of life. But in these phases of life, there is a very interesting phase called as adolescence or adolescent phase. The adolescent phase is the most tumultuous period of any individual because there will be so many questions going on in their mind. There are so many physical changes that are appearing in an individual. There are so many internal changes that are occurring. A lot of questions run through the mind which are connected to sexual education. So today's discussion is connected to the adolescence phase itself. Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. We are continuing our discussion of Class 8 NCERT, and you already know there is a chapter by chapter discussion going on, and we have reached till chapter 8, that is reaching the age of adolescence. That is the agenda for today's discussion. But you already know, if you have missed out these chapters or if you have missed out the 6th and 7th discussion, then you can find the entire playlist by searching the ID @Rahul Sai 222. I'll be sharing these playlists on this particular social media ID, Rahul SAI 222. There is no space in any of these things. I'll be sharing the playlist on Telegram as well as Instagram. So in today's discussion, we are talking about adolescence. We'll understand what is the meaning of adolescence, what are the changes that occur during adolescence, and why these changes occur. This is the domain of today's discussion. Let's begin without any delay. But before all this, there is a small notice for all of you. If you are preparing for UPSC Civil Service Examination, then this is the batch for you, Prelims to Interview batch. And our morning batch is closing out on 20th May, batch 6. Although there is another opportunity to join the evening batch, which is starting from 25th May, but the classes will be running at 6 p.m. Now you must be having a question. Sir, why do I have to join these batches? See, we will be preparing you for UPSC Civil Service Examination 2024. Starting from your prelims, we will be hand-holding you till your interview program. So it's a long program where we'll prepare for prelims. If you clear prelims examination, your mains residential program would be completely funded by StudyIQ. We'll be preparing you for interview as well. There would be mock interviews for you. All this, including one-to-one mentorship, group mentorship, which is priced at a very affordable range of 29,999. Now, to avail discounts on this, just use the code Rahul Live. Whenever you check out, use the coupon code Rahul Live from the app also or the website. You will get maximum discount. So I'll see you in the class. Right. I was mentioning that our discussion is connected to adolescence, and I told you in our life we all go through these phases. I have gone through the phase, you have gone through the phase. If you have not gone yet, then you will be going through it. Right? So we start our life as a baby or an infant. Then comes the childhood, sweet childhood, right? The school days. Then we have a phase of adolescence, the high school and the college intermediate phase, or your degree college phase. And this adolescent phase is so beautiful and so intriguing. There are so many questions running in our mind. Then we move on to adulthood, again, marriage, family, etc. Then the old age, then the end of life. As I told you, adolescent phase. It's a very interesting phase. First of all, how do you define adolescence? Adolescence, technically, it is defined as a phase which more or less begins at the age of 11 and ends around 18-19, right? Adolescence. Now, why is it important? Adolescents are also called as teenagers because you see teen in the year, right? 13, it starts with 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19. That's why they're called as teenagers. It's the age, teenage. Why? Because during these phases, a lot of changes occur in an individual's body, both male and female. Now, what happens here? What happens during the adolescent phase or at the onset of adolescence, which is called as puberty, onset of puberty, there are constant changes, especially in the reproductive parts or reproductive system of individuals. And as soon as puberty ends around the age of 18-19, where we say they have now transformed into adults, the age would be 18 plus. So once they are adults, they reach the reproductive maturity age. Now, when puberty hits, hitting puberty means now they are able to reproduce, but they still haven't reached the age of reproductive maturity. That's the understanding. All right. So adolescence and puberty, they are connected. Again, the year might vary. As I told you, it varies. It starts somewhere around 11. If someone is precautious, then it might start even before that. But in general, 11 to 18 is the age of adolescence, and around 11, 12, slowly and steadily, the onset of puberty begins and the features are seen. Now, during this puberty phase, during this teenage, a lot of changes occurs in an individual. Now, what are those changes? A lot of physical changes start appearing. First thing is there is an increase in height. As soon as adolescent hits or adolescence starts, puberty is hit, then there is an increase in height, both in boys and in girls. There is a sudden spurt in height. Now, this might differ from individual to individual. Some might see a slower gradual growth, some might see a sudden growth, because during this time the bones elongate and slowly and steadily muscle mass starts to build. So there is an increase in height. A person's hands and leg, they start to elongate, and around the age of 18 years a person is matured enough and they more or less reach their maximum height. But please remember, there is no hard and fast rule that every individual's height should grow at this particular age. It should start at 11 only, it should end at 18 only. The year might vary, but during this phase there is a sudden growth in the height. Apart from growth in height, there is a change in the body shape. Now, you must have observed this. If especially the boys in high school, they start to grow, their shoulders start to broaden, their chest start to widen, right, and a muscle mass would build up. That's why you see a very athletic body of these boys during the adolescence phase as soon as they enter this age. And in girls also, there are a lot of changes. Girls, the height will increase, muscle mass will increase, and there is a characteristic widening around the waist that happens. And in both boys and girls, muscle mass will start to grow during the adolescent phases. So there is increase in height, there is changes in the body shape. Apart from that, there is a voice change which is observed, especially in the boys. It happens both in boys and girls, but in boys, there is a prominent observation of Adam's apple. You can see there is a development of larynx or voice box. And as soon as the onset of puberty is hit, you will see in males or in boys the growth of Adam's apple. And the voice also changes. The voice now starts to become heavy. Boys generally develop a deep voice, whereas girls develop a high-pitched voice. And this particular outgrowth or a spurt here around the neck, it's called as Adam's apple. And please remember, Adam's apple is found only in boys or only in males, because in females and girls, there is no growth which is visible here, although there can be a change in voice for sure. So these are some of the changes that occur during puberty. Apart from this, there is now increased activity of sweat glands and the sebaceous glands, right? We know the sweat and sebaceous gland, they are activated, and because of these reasons, you will see that during the adolescent phase, during the puberty, the skin of boys and girls both, it becomes quite oily, and because of which you will see something called as adolescent acne, right? You see a lot of pimples on the face. These things start to appear. There is why? Because there is intense activity in the skin glands in individuals, in both young boys and young girls. Apart from this, there is development of sex organs. Now, in our previous discussion, we have spoken about reproduction, fertilization, and I told you reproductive organs in male, they are a pair of testicles, then sperm duct and a penis. Slowly and steadily, these organs start to grow. And at the onset of puberty, testes, they start to produce sperm now. Similarly, in girls, in females, the ovaries start to develop, ovaries start to mature, and they start to release the female gamete, that is the ovum. So eggs begin to mature and ovaries start to release these mature eggs. And that is when the concept of menstrual cycle comes. We'll talk about that in some time. So these are certain changes which occur in the adolescents during the adolescent phase. Apart from this, as I told you, the testes and ovaries, they are the male and female reproductive parts. We have discussed about that. Along with this, there is also a change in the physical appearance. In boys, slowly the development of mustache starts. The facial hair starts to grow. There is also hair growth on hand. In fact, in females also it happens, but in females, the mustache and facial hair development is not there. But body hair, slowly and steadily, body hair starts to grow in both boys and girls. But in boys, specifically, the facial hair starts to grow. There is now a visibility of mustache as well as beard. Apart from that, at the onset of puberty, I told you there is growth of hair in some parts of the body. There is growth of hair in the underarms, which is common for boys as well as girls. Please try to understand it. It is very common. It is very natural. Both boys and girls, they slowly and slowly start to grow underarm hair and hair growth around pubic region. So for males, for boys, there is hair growth around chest, facial hair, which is a little characteristic, but hair growth is also seen underarm and in the pubic region. And same for females. In females, there is underarm growth hair and pubic growth hair. But another characteristic feature in females, as soon as they hit puberty, is the development of breasts. Slow and steady development of breasts. All right. So these are some characteristic features that are seen in young boys and young girls going through the phase of adolescence. That's why I told you it is a tumultuous phase. It is a confusing phase, especially both for boys and for girls. For girls, it is more characteristic because the menstrual cycle also starts during this period. Now, the question is, why these things happen? So, why these things start right now? You said somewhere around the age of 11, 12, it starts. But why only at that time? What happens during this time? So, during this time, certain specific hormones are released, and these hormones are controlled by different glands in our body. And these are controlled through endocrine glands, specifically one of the endocrine glands, that is pituitary gland. It is responsible for onset or beginning of this puberty, because pituitary gland is going to release certain hormones which in turn help in releasing of hormones by testes and ovaries. And what hormones are produced in boys and girls? Specifically, male hormone testosterone, it begins to be released at the onset of puberty, and in females, the ovaries start to produce a hormone called as estrogen. So in males, we see testosterone, and because of this testosterone, what happens? There is development of brain, there is development of muscles, bone development, yes, bone marrow development. Then there is different kind of skin growth. The hairs would be developing, right? Skin hairs would be developing. Apart from that, sex organs also start to develop, and this begins the development of sperm as well. Slowly and slowly, sperm production. And in females, the ovaries start to release estrogen. Now, estrogen has a very similar role: brain development, liver development, bones, skin, etc. The uterus starts to develop, uterus starts to mature, ovaries mature, the breasts start to protrude out, and the beginning of menstrual cycle also takes place. But please remember, there is one particular pointer here. If I want to create a question, say I create a question, consider the following statements. Testosterone is present only in males. Estrogen is present only in females. Both the statements are absolutely wrong. Because some amount of testosterone, just remember, some amount of testosterone is also present in females, some amount of estrogen is also present in males. Now the question is, sir, who produces it? Different glands help in producing it. In fact, the testes are made up of Leydig cells. We'll talk about that in depth in our subsequent discussion also. Leydig cells also produce some amount of estrogen. The same happens in ovaries also. They produce small amount of testosterone. Along with it, the adrenal gland also produce some amount of testosterone in females. Please remember these things. All right? Right. So we spoke about hormones. Now, what kind of hormones? How hormones regulate our body? I told you there is a gland called as pituitary gland, which is called master gland. Pituitary gland is found around the brain, right? Somewhere here. Pituitary gland is found somewhere here, right? So at the onset of puberty, it releases certain hormones. In fact, the pituitary gland is called as master gland. Why? Because the hormones that it releases, it helps in releasing of hormones by other glands as well. That's why it's called as master gland. So what hormones it releases? It releases thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. After that, the thyroid gland, it releases thyroxine stimulating. But for us, the most important are the gonadotrophins, which are follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So once the pituitary gland, it releases follicle stimulating hormone in females and luteinizing hormone in males, then the activity of ovaries and testes starts respectively. Now, how does it happen? See, pituitary gland, it is an endocrine gland. So hormones here are released directly from the pituitary and they enter the bloodstream. They directly enter the bloodstream, and through the bloodstream they reach the target site, that is, they reach the testes, they reach the ovaries, and then the onset of puberty begins. This is the beauty of adolescence. This is the beauty of puberty. Now, question might come in your mind that you said a term called as endocrine gland. Now, what is this endocrine gland? I want to understand, and what is the counterpart of this? See, endocrine gland in our body, we have many. We'll talk about that in some time. You'll get more information about that. But as I mentioned, pituitary gland. Okay? So pituitary gland is endocrine gland because it releases hormones directly into the bloodstream. The hormones are chemicals which are mostly proteins. Some of the hormones can be steroids. Some of the hormones can also be amino acid derivatives. But in general, endocrine glands, they release directly in the bloodstream, which reaches the target site. But in our body, we also have certain exocrine glands. Exocrine glands, they do not release in the blood. That means the hormone that is released or whatever secretions this gland, it is not released in the blood. Can you think of some examples? I can think of one right now, the saliva. There are salivary glands here. The saliva is released directly in the mouth. It is not in the bloodstream. Very similarly, I have so many internal glands in my digestive system. We spoke about digestive system. We spoke about liver. We spoke about the other intestinal glands, which directly release juices into the digestive tract or the GI tract. Or we can talk about the mammary glands in females. The mammary gland releases milk, not in the bloodstream, directly, right? So these are some of the examples. Similarly, we have skin, right? Skin or sebaceous gland. What are these? These also releases some kind of chemicals or substances which are directly released on the surface. So exocrine gland, not in the bloodstream. Endocrine means in the bloodstream. Clear? Now, what are these endocrine glands? There are so many examples. I told you one of the master glands is pituitary glands. Here it is, master gland, just behind your brain, in the internal brain, in the midbrain you find it, and it releases a lot of hormones. Why is it called master gland? Because whatever hormones it releases, it activates others. For instance, the thyroid stimulating hormone TSH, it activates the thyroid gland, and this releases thyroxine. If we do not have thyroxine, we get goiter. Now, similarly, for us, which is very relevant for this discussion, is pituitary gland. It releases the luteinizing hormone. Pituitary gland, it releases the follicle stimulating hormone, and as soon as these are released and they reach the target site, now testicles start producing sperms and ovaries start producing your egg. There are also many other endocrine glands like pancreas. For example, pancreas is a very important gland. Many people have a misconception that insulin is something which is released by liver. No. Remember, insulin, which regulates your blood, it is released by pancreas. In fact, pancreas releases two very important hormones. One is insulin. Remember, one is insulin and the other one is glucagon. Insulin and glucagon, they help in regulating blood sugar by increasing and decreasing respectively, right? So again, insulin helps in lowering, not increasing, decreasing. Insulin helps in lowering, glucagon helps in enhancing the blood sugar level in our blood. Apart from that, there are many other endocrine glands like adrenal gland. Adrenal gland, whenever we are charged up, whenever we are energized, then adrenal gland releases epinephrine. Colloquially, we know it as adrenaline, right? You feel energized, you feel excited because of adrenal glands. So about these glands, we'll talk about it more extensively in our subsequent discussions as well. But right now, I hope you have understood how hormones work, how they are activated. Now, apart from that, reproductive phase in both females and males, it begins at puberty, as I told you, because the hormones are released. Now, as soon as the hormones are released, the hormones activate the reproductive parts. Means now they have ability to reproduce. But again, by the age of 18, 19, till the age of 18, 19, they do not reach that maturity phase. Now, in females, the adolescence may begin a year or two earlier. That's why they say females, they slowly and slowly start to mature earlier. You must have seen in your kids or in class also, you must have seen generally girls are more healthier around the age of 11, 12. Suddenly around the age of 16, 17, 18, you'll see boys growing more extensively in terms of height also and in terms of growth also. That's why the adolescence hits generally in females a year or two earlier, around 11. So adolescence or puberty hits somewhere around 11 to 14. In some boys, it may be a little delayed. But remember, in males, the reproductive age, it starts with puberty and it ends in death itself. That means a male body is able to produce sperms from the onset of puberty till death. Means the gametes are produced continuously. But a female body, it has a reproductive age or a reproductive phase. It starts at the onset of puberty and more or less it ends somewhere around 50 years, around 45 to 50 years it ends. So a woman, they go through three phases. The first phase where the puberty hits or the adolescence hits, it's called as menarche. It starts somewhere around 11 to 12 years age, and during menarche the menstrual cycle begins. And I explained you what is this menstrual cycle. In our previous discussion, we spoke about that, right? As soon as the egg is released, that egg is anticipating a sperm. And if egg and sperm meet, then there is fertilization, a zygote is produced. And for this zygote to be attached to uterus, there has to be some sort of lining. And since the egg is released, it is anticipating a sperm. A slow and steady endometrium lining is developed around the uterus, because if a fertilized egg comes, it has to attach to the uterus. But if the egg is not fertilized, then the endometrial layer is released along with the egg. That is why you see blood and menstrual flow during menstrual cycle. So menarche is the beginning of the reproductive age. And during this age, from 12 to 50, you will see menstruation. Every 28 to 30 days, a woman's body undergoes a menstrual cycle. Every 28 to 30 days, an egg is released. And then after the age of 50, we call it menopause. And in menopause, there is no menstrual cycle. There is no production of egg. That means the woman no longer remains fertile. They cannot reproduce. Clear? So these are the three phases through which a woman passes through: menarche, menstruation phase, and then this menopause. Now, how is the sex of a child determined? It is very important in this sexual education age, or in the era of this. We need to give this knowledge, because there is a lot of misconception. Many people are especially in rural areas, in other areas, they believe that sex of the baby is determined by female. It is not determined by the female. The female has 23 pairs of chromosome. That means there are 22 pairs of chromosome plus there are 2 chromosomes XX, whereas males have 22 pairs of chromosomes plus X and Y. And we know Gregor Mendel's laws of inheritance. The genes are shared equally. So what happens is, if the sperm which carries X gene, if it meets the egg, because the egg is always X, the sperm which carries the X gene, if it fertilizes, then a girl child is born. And if the sperm which carries the Y gene, if it fertilizes the egg, then a boy is born. So the sex of the baby is not determined by a woman. The sex of the baby is determined on the basis of which sperm fertilizes the egg, because the egg contains both X chromosomes, 22 pairs of chromosomes plus XX, right? But it is the male or the male sperm which ultimately determines the sex of the offspring of the baby. Please remember this. Apart from this, hormones are also released in animals as well. It's not just humans, but in animals as well. See, in many mammals, hormones are released. In fact, there are thyroid glands, pituitary glands in animals like dogs, donkeys, cows, etc. But hormones are also present in many insects. We have seen that an insect goes through a phase of larva to caterpillar, then a pupa, then eventually an adult. It is also controlled by the juvenile hormone thyroxine, which is released by thyroid in many insects, which help them to go through metamorphosis. Thyroxine is also very important for human body also, because if there is absence of thyroxine, then diseases like goiter can happen, right? Apart from this, the chapter ultimately ends by giving you some knowledge about maintaining reproductive health. The needs of adolescents are quite extensive. As I told you, during adolescence, the height increases, the body build increases, the muscle mass increases, the voice deepens, facial characteristics, that means facial hair start to emerge, means the requirement of the body is extensive. So a very good balanced diet is needed, where you need to consume proteins, you need to consume carbohydrates, you need to consume fats, you need to get vitamins, vitamin based foods. Apart from that, physical exercise is extremely important during this phase. Also, maintaining personal hygiene, taking bath every day, maintaining hygiene during menstrual cycle, it also becomes imperative, females. And this is the phase where adolescents or the teenagers, they should say no to drug smoking, drinking. In fact, you should say no to drug smoking, drinking always. But during this phase, the chances of addiction are quite high, right? Because as I told you, it's a tumultuous phase, and if you are addicted to any of these things, it is going to be catastrophic for the future of your life. So remember these things. Apart from that, there are certain myths and taboos, do's and don'ts. First of all, females or girls, they do not get pregnant just by looking at boys. No. Pregnancy only occurs when there is some sort of sexual activity, when sperm reaches the ovum. And for sperm to reach ovum, there has to be sexual activity. Apart from that, the sex of the child is not recognized, or mother is not responsible for the sex of the child. It is the father who is responsible for sex of the child. And finally, girls should not be allowed to work in kitchen during menstruation. Menstruation is not a discriminating factor. It should not be a discriminating factor. Menstruation is a very natural process, right? So menstrual cycle, going through that period of the month, it should not be discriminated with. That you should not work in kitchen, you should not do this thing, you should not visit certain places. There is nothing like that, right? All these are myths and taboos. Please remember that. Apart from that, adolescent pregnancy is a very big issue in almost all the countries, because as I told you, this is a phase of life where there are questions, where individuals like to experiment, but that experimentation might lead to a problem. That's why I told you, yes, of course, an individual, when they are adolescent, between the age of 11 to 18, of course, they are capable of reproducing, but they are not mature enough to undergo that reproduction process. A female body before 18 or before 19, mentally and physically, motherhood would be very draining on her. That is why in our country, the age of marriage is 18 for females, the age of marriage is 21 for boys. And this has to be adhered to. That's why it is said adolescent pregnancy can create a lot of complications for the child, for the mother, throughout their life. So it's better to be avoided, and it's better to be safeguarded, right? So these are some of the information, or these are some of the snippets from this chapter of reaching the adolescence. I hope it was fruitful for you, right? I hope it was fruitful. And do remember hormones, because we'll be talking about these hormones in our subsequent discussions also, because many a times hormone based questions can come directly. A simple question, which gland releases this hormone, or there can be a match the following correct pair question giving hormone and its function. Such questions have appeared in examination before also. That's the end of this particular chapter. And do remember, if you have liked this video, you can always follow me on this particular ID @ Rahul Sai 222. Thank you for watching this video again. Jai Hind.